All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Matt's Mindset Monday. And today I have a fellow realtor and one of my favorite people in our boards, and that is Belinda Hurst. And she specializes in, well, I don't know if specialized, but you live in a rural area, and you sell a lot of rural real estate. And there is a huge difference between selling in the city versus selling in the county, and then selling even more in more rural areas, USDA eligible areas and things like that. Hancock County is where you live, correct? It is.
Yeah.
Hancock County, you live there also? Yeah. So we're going to take a deep dive into the differences between city real estate and rural real estate. What do you need to know? And more importantly, how to thrive. Now, of course, Belinda is very much humble person and doesn't like to say that she's thriving, but I see the numbers and I know you're thriving. So that's why we're using that word, little catchphrase there. But before we get started, why don't you tell everybody, kind of do a quick introduction. Who are you? What do you do?
Well, first, I'm a mom of 5 and I sell real estate and I'm active in our community. Really, I just like to be out around people and doing what I like to do. So that's really about it.
And being a mom of 5 and selling real estate, what's that? I'm sure that gets hectic. We've talked about that before. It gets a little crazy from time to time. So what do you do to keep everything, to keep the sanity, for lack of a better term?
My kids are older. They don't need babysitters. We don't have to worry about childcare. They are actually a huge help when it comes to keeping things organized, keeping people straight. And they're actually amazing about, if they know somebody, they want to communicate to them, hey, my mom sells real estate. They're more than willing to jump in and help do things. So actually having a lot of kids is beneficial in certain ways. Other days, it's like I can't be everywhere at once. So some people get let down and people get grouchy, and it's just the way it is. Yeah,
that's awesome. You got any future realtors in the bunch yet? Do you know?
Yeah, we have one who I would like to see probably try it, but I don't know that she will want to do that.
To be determined, right? To be determined.
Yeah, we'll see what she does, but yeah.
So let's go ahead and dive in. What in your mind are the biggest, because I know you sell in Owensboro as well. So what's the biggest difference in selling? And we're gonna call Owensboro city. It's to be determined. Absolutely defined as a city or not. But what's the biggest difference between selling in the city versus selling in the county?
I really think it's understanding the financing options. So if you have a client who's FHA, basically any home in the city, as long as it's good, we can get them in there. But if you're trying to buy a large tract of land with that, you have to understand the differences, knowing that the land can only be a certain percentage of that value. It's 30% is what it is. Also, like manufactured homes, even though it's in a USDA area, we can't do that. Understanding the difference and being able to read surveys, just that kind of stuff, I feel like is probably the most important ones.
And so I just realized the other day that the Davis County PVA started putting plats online, which is for in the surrounding counties, whether it's Hancock, Ohio, and things like that. I know getting the surveys aren't as easy as the city in terms of getting plats and things like that. So how important is it to understand the boundaries of a property, because it's not clearly staked most of the time? And then where do you get that information?
So our PVA is Karen Robertson here in Hancock County, and she's an amazing asset. Also, just knowing your county officials, being able to go to them and having good relationships with surveyors. That way, if you do have questions, they're more likely to help you with those. Our county in Hancock here, you have to actually pay for PVA service because we're smaller. It's not free. And our surveys and deeds, plats are not uploaded in there yet. So hopefully that's something that we can work on. But yeah, you just have to have good communication. Go up there, they'll send it to you. Not a big deal.
Oh, so they'll actually send it. You don't have to go yourself and pull the.
If they're not super busy, do you like to ask them to do that all the time? No, but you know what I mean? If it's in a pinch, you absolutely can.
I guess it just depends on how many times you're having to ask. And then
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want to irritate them. So
what else do you need to know outside of surveys and being able to read a survey? Because I know that's a skill that you've probably learned over time, but what other things do you kind of need to be able to know in order to sell in rural areas?
I think you need to understand the people. Their wants are going to be way different than somebody who is wanting to be in the city. So they don't want to see their neighbors. A lot of times they need the privacy, and you have to understand the individuals and the difference in those individuals, I think.
So how do you go about finding that out? Like, have you just learned like a series of questions to ask them, or are they kind of just usually upfront and volunteer that information? Or?
Oh no, you have to. A lot of times, well, you know, Matt, people are kind of private. If they don't know you well, they don't want to really give you a lot of personal information. They want you to just kind of do what they're saying. So I think you have to kind of just build that relationship with them, and you have to just ask the small questions, you know, that fit that person's personality. Hopefully they start opening up, and sometimes it takes you a while, and it takes, you know, some teeth pulling, but you get there.
We eventually get that information after the fourth house, and we've shown, and it's like nothing meets the criteria. I was like, all right, let's sit back down and talk about this, because apparently one of us is missing the boat somewhere.
Well, I think a lot of times buyers really don't know what it is that they want until you're out there looking. And so you kind of just build a checklist off of what doesn't work and what does work, and hope you can eventually find them something. So
yeah, no, we do the same thing with the checklist, and try to discover, you know, what's the absolute things that you must have, and then on top of that, what are the things that you want. And then over the last couple of years, and I was going to ask you about this, is I've seen a huge number of buyers in the city who are now, especially in the beginning of the pandemic, who wanted to move out to the county. And I felt like everybody wanted a couple acres with a shop and 2 chicken coops on it. So, and they wanted it for $150,000. And I was like, oh, yeah, you're gonna have to give up something there. So have you seen a big like transition and move to the county?
Yes. So whenever COVID first happened, I had a really nice listing, but it was a pole barn style house. The home was smaller, but it was crop ground plus some woods. It was really nice. We ended up with like 25 showings on that thing in like 4 days. Wow. And it was a situation where a lot of them were actually out of state. It was people from New York, Michigan, cities that wanted to be rural. They thought, you know, with the pandemic, it was time to make that shift. So I do think we've seen a lot of people coming from out of state and also just from the city. So,
and have you seen where those people have been there for a year or two now, we're a little further along? Have you gotten any calls when we're like, hey, this wasn't for me, I need to sell this place and get back to the city? Have you seen any buyer's remorse?
No, I really have not.
Good.
I think it's an adjustment for sure. Like, for me, I don't know that I could go live in a subdivision, but I think once you adjust to it, like I would like the amenities of being in town, but it's just that short adjustment period. And now I haven't really seen much buyer's remorse.
Girl, let me tell you, we moved out to the Summit, and I mean, we're not in the county, like we're 12 minutes from my office. It was an adjustment for that. It's like, what do you mean we can't order pizza? Like, we got a DoorDash or go pick it up. I'm like, nope, this is the extent of how far I get out of the city. That's how city boy I am. Like I can't even be more than 12 minutes away. So what other areas outside of rural do you focus on, and why?
I don't really focus on a certain location. I would say mine is mostly just the people that I focus on. So if you've got a client who's super happy, they're going to tell their friends about you. They're going to do whatever. So you're going to get those clients off of your referrals. We all know that. And those are the people that I focus on. So if that one person sends you 2 and those 2 people each send you 2, I mean, you're going to kind of just go to that area. You're not going to really focus, market, and advertise there. But if that's what they want to do, that's what I do.
So do you have a limit as far as travel? Like,
I try to stay within an hour, hour and a half depending on the client, price range. And sometimes you do have to, if somebody's in $110,000 price range and they want to go an hour away, say they want to be all the way in Henderson. For me, it's really not feasible to do that. You have
that one out.
to, you have to understand that part of it, or else you will lose money. But yeah, I mean, I just like to be within an hour.
Yeah. So, and I noticed that about like, so our office we have in Elizabethtown, you know, they'll travel an hour, hour and a half. I'm like, I ain't leaving Dix County. What are you talking about? You know? But also, but part of the reason I do that is because I don't know the rural market. So I believe in specializing in certain areas. So like, there's no way, and I'll own this 100%. There's no way when it comes to selling farmland that I have the knowledge that you have. So you could better service the client than I can, you know, and I think that goes, you know, multiple ways. If it came down to, you know, servicing inner Owensboro, I might have a couple more connections that if somebody was building in order to be able to connect to utilities, you know. So I think it is important that we have territories. And then it's like you said, what's our range that we're willing to go, and as long as that falls inside our knowledge base, then there's nothing wrong with that at all. What's the furthest you've sold?
Probably the other side of Butler County.
Really?
I had a client and he was actually referred to me from a loan officer. So we were supposed to be looking not quite that far away, but this place popped up. It was really, really nice. It checked every single box. And so I said, well, let's go. And I felt like the price was fair. I pulled what I could. And I mean, it worked out. He's a very, very happy client. But yeah, the other side of Butler County was probably the farthest.
Nice. Nice. We've sold some of a couple at the lakes, but that's about it for us. So do you find that when you're, you know, people who are looking and they're, is it more people want to be in a certain location, a certain county, or is it whatever house fits my needs and then I'm willing to go there?
So we were talking about people trying to relocate to a rural area. For a lot of them, it's not so much about a certain area. Of course, East Davis County, some people want to be in Hancock County. You've got those people, but you have some are like, I just need to be out. They're the ones that you have to kind of reel in or refer out. They're the ones that are going to send you something on the other side of Louisville, or it could be, you know, who knows where, but you've just got to kind of reel them in a little bit or know when it's time to.
Speaking of that, what's the furthest? I'm just throwing all kinds of random questions at you right now. What's the furthest you've ever drove between showings for one client? Like from one side, like distance, I guess.
About 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Really?
Yeah. And it was actually that same client. We were in Henderson one day and then all the way out to Irvington the same exact day and then back to McLean.
Nice. That's covered some range there.
Yeah.
And so speaking of people, how do you adjust to and understand the differences when people are looking at multiple locations? Do you try to hone in on, you know, their particular needs, or do you try to hone in onto their location, or is it just vary by person?
It varies by person. People's needs and wants are always different. And I also think that from person to person, if you start just making a checkbox like list, it's not personable anymore. That's one thing that I like to run my business. You have to be personable. You have to understand your client and you have to kind of know. I guess my biggest question is, why are we doing this? Like, what is your purpose? That way we can kind of make sure their check boxes actually match their purpose.
Yeah, that's perfect. I was sitting here thinking of that is, if somebody was wanting to move rural, maybe they haven't lived rural before, but they wanted to take on the rural living. Like what either advice would you give them, or what type of questions would you ask so that they understand what they're getting themselves into?
The drive time. Like for me to drive 45 minutes to get somewhere is not a big deal. Like I'm putting 55, 60,000 miles on a vehicle a year. So they have to understand that it's not going to take you 5 minutes to get to the store. You have to make sure that you're going to actually be okay with that. When you drive to a property, they're like, well, that was a long drive. Well, that's how you're going to be driving every single day to go to work, to get where you need to be. Also, a lot of times, unfortunately, is connectivity. Like, we have to make sure if a person works from home and we're going to have satellite internet, like, is that really going to work for you? That's a big deal.
So have you learned to just kind of research what internet's available for each different location, especially when you have people working from home, I guess?
Yeah, you have to make sure, I mean, they have to have internet, unfortunately, is a basic need at this point. If right now we're all using the internet. So if they don't have that availability, they need to make sure that they're okay with that. Some people, they do not care about being connected. They don't care about phone service. They're in the country and they're there for a reason. Other people, it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and I found a lot of people who are relocating who haven't lived on large lots before or haven't lived rural at all underestimate the maintenance of property.
Yes. Yeah. It takes 3 hours to mow, not 10 minutes. And so you gotta, calculate things.
Yeah, and if you're going to outsource it, the price goes up, tenfold when you have multiple acres and things like that. And then the other thing is going from like city sewer and things like that to septic systems, because there's maintenance behind septic systems, certain things you can and can't do and stuff like that too. So what other challenges, so to speak, and I don't even think they're challenges, I think it's a lifestyle, but what other lifestyle differences can you think of between city and rural living?
I mean, I would say for me, the biggest difference is just making sure, I don't really know, Matt. I mean, I wouldn't say this.
I think we might have covered them all. I'm just sitting here thinking of internet, the maintenance of the lawn, of the ground, drive time, which I think is huge.
It is.
Yeah, maybe that is it.
Yeah.
I thought I had something. I thought I had an idea that I was going to go, but it left me. So let's move on to the next one. So
we probably had it together and it's completely gone. So
yeah, we had a thought and it left us. So let's go. How do you attract rural customers? Like, where's your business come from? Do you specifically target certain people or areas, or just where do you get your business?
So the thing about being rural is I think it's important for you to be a part of that community. Those people, again, if you don't have great internet service, believe it or not, the newspaper is a big deal, because they're still getting the newspaper. They got to know what's going on. I think just being a part of your community, talking to those people understanding that you do sell real estate is a big deal. And one thing about being rural, you cannot get your feelings hurt because you have less people, you're more spaced out, and there's a ton of realtors. So they might choose somebody else. You just have to understand that they knew you were a realtor, and it's fine. You can't sit there and waller in it. So
do you advertise in the newspaper?
Yeah. Every week.
So that's a huge difference for us. I'm not saying I've ran newspaper ads, but very rarely, because with us, we can hit so many more people through targeted Facebook ads and different things like that. So the cost per view, if you will, is a lot less. And I never thought about that from your standpoint of not everybody having internet or strong internet, then the newspaper is more relevant.
Yeah, we have less than 8,900 people in Hancock County. And so
I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah. So you have to think a certain amount of that population is going to be older people, and they're still making sure they're reading that newspaper with their coffee every week. And I think it's important. So
yeah. Do you have, what other type of advertising do you do? Like, do you have, is there events, fairs, different things like that you do? Any billboards, anything like that?
We do have a billboard. I don't know that it's on 60. So I think it's kind of one of those things where you drive past it every day. It doesn't change. You kind of just move on from that. I'm sure
it helps a little bit with top of mind though. So maybe if they put a face with the name, if nothing else. So
yeah. And then, of course, we have the fair, which is a big deal in a rural area. That's a big deal. Ohio County here. It's a big deal. So I think being there, talking to people, I think that's important. Of course, we have Facebook, and I always make sure everything goes on Facebook. And I think that helps keep everybody top of mind. We're actually in our county, we're doing a new website to try to keep everything together, which has been a big deal. It's kind of like, instead of people having to go to different Facebook groups, go all over the place, the newspaper, it's going to be one website that does have the local businesses, and it's going to be called Hancock is Home. So kind of like over in Tell City, they've done their Perry County, thing. So that's kind of what we're doing. Our chamber, industrial foundation, a lot of local businesses, realtors, everybody's kind of pitching in and giving good ideas.
Awesome. So is that something the county and the chamber is heading, or is that just a group of y'all got together and decided to do it?
Well, Tina Snyder at the library, she's actually the one that's kind of heading it. And then we've got like Wade Gaynor at Independence Bank. He's helping. Industrial Foundation, the chamber. Yeah. So everybody's just kind of pitching in, and I think it's going to be really, really good for our community.
Awesome. That's awesome. Wade used to live out in our neighborhood before he moved to us recently. So love Wade. He's a good guy.
Yes,
What ways do you think the rural market could, should, or would improve, if it even needs to? Well, is this, if you could change anything about the rural market, what would it be?
I think it would be the connectivity and just making sure that people do have better internet access, utilities, you know what I mean? That type of stuff. I think in a rural area, if you have that stuff, I think it opens it up to more people. And I think that would be beneficial. And right now, I mean, we just need houses, and that's the toughest part. So.
Yeah. And have you seen very much new development and specifically in your area? Have you seen where maybe wooded areas starting to turn into neighborhoods, farmlands, different things like that? Or is it just kind of still just individual building on individual lots mostly?
Mostly individuals building. I mean, there's a couple tracts of ground that are listed for developments, but it's just, when you're not in the city, it does cost you more to develop that ground. So your utilities, it's going to cost you more to run it. It's going to cost more to make sure all of it's handled so that you can do a larger development.
And I guess if you're going to do a development, then you're kind of in a neighborhood at that point. And if you're going to live in a neighborhood, unless you want to strategically be somewhere close to, maybe you work there or something like that, then yeah, I could see that. So, and then that creates more inventory challenges. I was looking at some inventory numbers, and we were talking about right before this, but even in Owensboro and in Davis County, there's 100 active homes right now. And how many are active in Hancock?
4.
4?
Yeah. 4.
A little different.
Yeah.
Do you typically say, if you put something on the market, is there just a huge rush of showings, and it's multiple offers and things like that? And have you seen it slow down? Like, have you seen multiple offers slow down recently with the interest rates going up?
I think yes, is what we'll say to that. I think what it is also is a lot of sellers have become accustomed to multiple offers, but I think we're starting to kind of see that slow down to where if a seller put something on and somebody comes in and says, hey, I'm willing to pay you this, I'm going to waive inspection. They're like, take it. Let's just be done with it. Get the people out of my house and let's move on. I've seen a lot of that recently. They're kind of just nervous that prices are going to come down. So I don't know.
Yeah. And the interesting, I have this conversation all the time with people, and it's like, hey, when's the real estate market going to crash? I'm like, well, it's not really going to crash. It's probably just going to tabletop and more just like flatline for a little while. And we won't have this crazy 10% year over year appreciation and things like that. But with the mortgage rates going up, the buying power is going down to a certain extent. I mean, you're either going to bring more money to the table, you're going to be comfortable with more monthly payment, or you're going to, instead of looking at a $300,000 house, you might be looking at a $250,000 house in order to keep those factors the same. So it'd be interesting to see how it plays out over the next couple months.
Yeah, I don't know that we're going to crash. We're not going to have 2017 prices ever again. That's not going to happen. I mean, it's just
totally
not
agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So if let's speak to the agents out there, not to create you competition or anything, but if somebody lives in a rural area and they get their real estate license and they're wanting to focus on selling real estate in a rural area, what tips would you give? Not just new agents, but even existing agents that live in rural areas, like, because I mean, I look at the numbers and in terms of number of sales, you're one of the top when it comes to rural sales. So what tips would you give for all of our realtor friends out there trying to do what you do?
Talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors. My favorite thing to do, honestly, is talk to other agents. I think if you have a good working relationship with other agents and you guys have common ground and you know how each other work, it's a lot easier to get that transaction done. And just like we were talking about, is if I don't specialize on the west side of Louisville or Owensboro, like it may be better for me to say, hey, I've got my friend Matt who understands that area. Him and Shelly know what they're doing out there. Might be better to say, hey, Matt, let me refer this to you instead of me taking that risk of not doing my client.
And you already know I'm not driving outside Davis County, so you get all my Hancock County stuff.
No, you can list them, that way I can sell them and we can work together. It'll be good.
But I think it is really important to have those types of relationships with other agents,
Absolutely.
just especially when low inventory. I mean, we were talking right before this, and I think the Facebook Live group probably caught a piece of it, but we were talking about what's going to hit the market, and you said something about farmland. I was like, oh, I got something. So we'll connect later this week or at some point once I get some more details, and we'll have something lined up, and hopefully we can share that information. And all agents out there, this is why it's so important to have great relationships with your co-op agents, because the more you can network, the more opportunities you have for your buyers and for your sellers, and to be able to find out what's coming on the market. So well, let's do one final takeaway here. If somebody, I'm going to do two questions. Number one, from the consumer standpoint, if somebody is going rural, what should they know and what should they do?
If they're looking to buy rural, you think?
Yes.
What you mean? Okay, first, I think right now they need to understand what loans are available for them. I think that's the very most important thing, because if they're looking at buying 100 acres of ground, I mean, they're going to have their money down. We're not going to be able to do a government style loan. I think that is the most important thing, knowing what they want and if they're capable of buying it. Secondly, they need to know that it's a different lifestyle. We can't just have pizza delivered to the house. We have to know what we're doing, and you have to understand, what you need to be doing every day. And you have to make sure you have the time to do it, because that is one of the biggest struggles in this world we live in, is making sure you have time to actually live in the rural area.
Yeah, I love that. Let's take it to the sell side. So if I lived in Hancock County and I was calling you and saying, hey, I'm probably going to put my house up for sale in the next couple months, what advice would you give me prior to going on the market?
I would want you to make sure you knew what your plan was, where you plan to go, make sure that you are good with that. And then I would want to make sure the outside of your home is cleaned up, because I think that's very, very important in a rural area. If you show up and there's weeds and brush and briars everywhere, people have hesitance about that, because that creates more work for them in the long run if they want to get it cleaned up.
Yeah, I think that's a really important part. Like, even, because I mean, I've shown some projects earlier in my career, and it would be hay fields, right? And they're grown up in order to process the hay. But I would literally have people like, is it that hard to maintain this ground that they don't mow once a week? And I'm like, well, when you own 100 acres,
you're not mowing it every week.
You're on a bush hog schedule, right?
Yeah. But that is one thing that we just need to make sure timelines match up, and that we can have it presentable when it's time to go on the market. And if you went to my place right now, there's going to be some briars and there's going to be a mess, but we're busy, and it happens to everybody. It's not, farms aren't always going to be pretty. Acres of ground are not always going to be pretty. Your mower is going to break down. I mean, there's a lot to do.
And it's a lot of work. I think that's an important part, is especially if you get into, to real farmland. I mean, that's a lot of work. They earn every dollar that they get from those crops, for sure.
Even just 5 acres is a lot of work, because that's not really, I mean, unless there's a lot of woods and a tiny yard, I mean, you're going to be doing mowing and you're going to have to weed eat, and there's a lot to it.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. So let's flip it to the agent standpoint. So final takeaways, if you will, if you're a real estate agent looking to thrive in the rural market, what final tips, advice would you give, or just recap what we talked about?
I would just make sure that you talk to people, make sure that you understand the community, and make sure you understand what is available to people in that community. Like for us, we have a ton of industry here in Hancock County, but we don't have a McDonald's. So
I didn't know that. There's no McDonald's in Hancock County.
We have a Subway restaurant, not like a Subway. That was we were on vacation one time, and I was talking to a girl from New York, and she was asking where we were from. So I was explaining our area, and I'm like, we have one Subway, and we have 3 stoplights, I guess. And she's like, well, how do you get anywhere? Like, she thought the Subway was like transportation. I'm like, oh no. Like one Subway restaurant. But no, we don't have any fast food besides the Subway. And it's actually in Lewisport. And we do have a few restaurants now. We have a couple of local Mexican restaurants, and it is a difference, and they just need to understand the amenities, and that way they can explain it to their clients better. If you say, hey, this is a great area, well, but if you don't explain what is available to that person, I think that there could be some regrets. I think you just have to be transparent.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I know that knowing some people that have moved to the county, that's the one thing that they say is, I added, I'm making up the time, but 5 hours, 6 hours, 10 hours to my week in terms of stuff that I have to do between the maintenance, between going shopping, all of those things, taking kids to school, stuff like that. It's so there is a lot to think about when moving to the rural area, but I thought you brought up a lot of really good points. So any final words for our viewers before we wrap up today?
I don't think I have any final words, but I don't care to talk to anybody anytime if they have questions.
And if somebody is looking to move to Hancock County, and or just has agents are on here, maybe have questions about how to operate in rural, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Just my cell phone. Call me, text me, Facebook, just however.
Hard. I'm sure your number's not hard to find, right?
No, it's pretty well everywhere.
Just do internet search and you'll find it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, I really appreciate you. I know you're in between showings, doing final walkthroughs, stopping off at somewhere so you can hop on with me. I appreciate you spending some time together, and can't wait to do a deal with you soon.
I know, you too. Thanks, Matt, for having me.
All right. See ya.
All right. Thank you. Bye.